In 1994, a movie was made. Some of you may have seen it. Some of you may remember it. Some of you may not have only heard of it. Some of you may never heard of it, depending on what your age is. It was called Forrest Gump. It was an interesting movie starring Tom Hanks. The protagonist of the movie was Forrest Gump. He was diagnosed with an IQ of 75 and not very bright. And yet, through his life and through his persistence, he accomplished some really amazing things throughout this movie. But the interesting thing about him is that when his mother died, he started running. Didn't know where he was running to. He just started running. But people got inspired by him. They started running them too. And he ran, I believe, all the way across the country and back again. I think he spent 3 years running. And thus the phrase became popular for a while. And you look at the internet and see it, Run, Forrest, Run. And so Forrest Gump was running. And we're going to talk about running today a little bit. And we're going to make a reference to the prodigal son. We've all have heard the story, the prodigal son, before. And there are several metaphors in that story that we could use. There's some racial metaphors, certainly in there. Most churches overlook all those racial metaphors. But there's also some personal metaphors in that story. Because it's about this young man who had him and his brother, and the young man received an inheritance. And let me rephrase that. He was entitled to an inheritance, and he went to his father a little bit early and asked if he could have his inheritance. And his father gave it to him. And then we found that he went off into the world. You all know the story. And we're going to read a reference to it in Luke 15:11 through 16 is where we got a reference there to this. Luke 15, verse 11 through 16. A certain man had 2 sons. Now some people look at the metaphors here between the tribes of Judah and or the nation of Judah, the nation of Israel that divided back in the time of Rehoboam, king of Israel. I don't know if that's what he's referring to or not. But nevertheless, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me my portion of the inheritance which belongs to me. And the father gave him his share. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his inheritance in wild living. We certainly could look at the metaphor here. Sometimes people mock us when we talk about racial pride, white pride. And they say you have nothing to be proud of because you only can be proud of something you're born that you accomplished. But when we talk about racial pride, we're talking about pride and respect to our inheritance. Because we as a people, our race, has been given an enormous inheritance from God. And we've wasted it. We wasted our inheritance. But let's continue the story. So he wasted his life inheritance wild living. And when he spent it all, there arose a mighty famine in the land and began to be in want. He went after and joined himself to a citizen of that country who sent him into the fields to feed swine. And he would willingly eat the husk that the swines did eat. Really a sad story up to that point. Really sad. He had this one, kind of like our own nation, our own people. We received this wonderful inheritance that we've been given to us by God, by generations upon generations upon generations of our forefathers. And we wasted it. And so this is really a sad story here. This young man got this wonderful inheritance and he wasted it. He was working there at the family business, I guess. He thought life was a drag and there was no excitement. he thought to himself, it's the same grind day in and day out, day in and day out. And at some point he thought to himself, there's got to be more to life than this. And he wanted to have fun. He wanted to have some excitement. He wanted to go places and see things, and probably he wanted to meet some girls. So he went to his father, and he told his father, he said, I want my share of my inheritance. And father gave it to him. Then he went off into the world, and he let the good times roll. He was going to really be excited about life. And we had to, even though there's metaphors here about racial metaphors, it's also real personal metaphors here also about our lives and about our responsibility and the things to, not just responsibility to ourselves, not just responsibility to God, but responsibility to our racial brothers and sisters, responsibility to our forefathers, responsibility to all those who've gone before us, responsibility to our families. A lot of men, unfortunately, don't recognize or realize, and young boys that are sitting here need to realize that someday they're going to be the spiritual head of their family. And a lot of men don't understand that they're the spiritual head of their family. And the young boys here, they know that someday you're going to be the spiritual head of your family. You don't want to waste that inheritance. And so he completely discounted the wisdom of his father and went off to the world to have a good time. And he thought, like a lot of people think, that all he needed was money. If he just had enough money, life was going to be great. And of course, King Solomon talked about that in Ecclesiastes. But he was going to have a good time with his money. But the Bible tells us what? The love of money is the root of all evil. Not money itself, but the love of money. And because money is important, nobody's going to discount that money is important. Anybody who thinks money is not important, then please give it to me. Anybody out there who thinks money is not important, I'll take it, because money is important. But money is the root of all evil. But it is important, because you need money to exist. And money does provide comfort. And money does provide power. George Soros has a lot of power with his money. And so money does provide power. And because money provides comfort, provides power, a lot of people are willing to do anything to get it. They don't care. I mean, they'll do anything to get it. And mostly people, we like to think people are doing honest things, so they'll work long hours. They'll take a second job. They'll do whatever they can to provide for the family, work the long hours and the second job to get the money and get the power to provide a comfortable home for the family. Some will work when they're sick. I've seen, and women have a tendency to do that more than men do. In my observation, I may be wrong. Some may correct me. But in my observation, women in some ways, the corporations like women workers better than men workers. Because women, for the most part, they feel a very heavy responsibility to their family, and they'll work. They'll be up all night long caring for a young baby, and then they'll go off to work. And men have a little more of a cavalier attitude towards it. Take this job and shove it. If they don't like the balls, they'll say, "Help you up, give me another job." A woman will buckle down because she needs the job. So they'll work when they're sick. Some people will con others for money. They'll got a con job going on. And some will become thieves, and some will even kill for money. So this young man, he didn't steal, he didn't kill. He probably was basically a good person. He probably was actually probably a good person. He just didn't have much wisdom. And so he decided he's going to go off into the world, have fun. But the lesson here really isn't about money, but how we think our will is more important than the will of God. And people confuse what the will of God is. I know they think the will of God is to come to church and be sanctimoniously in a church. Some churches kind of believe that, and have enough candles lit and observe certain days, and very pious. But the will of God was what covered down in two things. What was that? You just love your God and love your people. He told that young lawyer. I know that Matthew says love your neighbor, but we also know that the word neighbor, that comes out of Leviticus, and it literally means love your kinsman. When people quote that, said, God says, love your neighbor. He's really not saying the guy that moves in next door to you, he's not your neighbor. He's saying, talking about love your kinsman. That's the will of God, to love our people. But anyway, so this young man, he valued money and what money can do as being more important than the respect of his father, and perhaps more important than even the love of his family. And he thought his money would bring him all the good pleasures, all the things that he saw on the internet. Well, didn't have internet. But maybe he did, in his own vision of the future, maybe, I don't know. But anyway, all the things he saw, all the things he could imagine, he thought he could get with just the money and the good times. And so he ran away from home. He took the money and ran. He ran away from his job. He ran away from his responsibilities to the family business. And he ran away from the teachings of his father. His father represented everything that he wanted to leave behind, the grind of the family business. He wanted to leave it all behind because he wanted to have a good time. Now, I don't know. I never ran away from home. I suspect most of you never ran away from home. But it does happen. Children will run away from home, but before they run away from home, they want to make sure that mom will pack a peanut butter sandwich and some cupcakes in their bag before they run away from home. And the child runs away from home because his mom told him to eat the carrots, and he's allergic to carrots. And so he ran away from home, and mom told him to take a nap. He didn't want to take a nap, and mom told him, or dad told him to do your homework. Didn't want to do the homework. And they got tired of the discipline, so the little child thought, I'm going to run away from home. And of course, they get to the bottom of the driveway, and then they don't know which way to go. And while that's somewhat innocent, it's more serious when a teenager runs away from home, because they end up so often on the streets or get involved in prostitution or drugs. And like I said, sometimes adults even run away from home. A few years ago, you may remember the story, 10, 15 years ago. There was what's called the runaway bride, Jennifer Wilbanks. Just a few days before her wedding, she ran away. And a few days later, she ended up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, claimed that she had been kidnapped, and later admitted that the whole thing was she made it all up. And as I said, she became known as the runaway bride. And but she didn't know where she was running to. That's why little children, like I said, get to the end of the driveway and they don't know where to go then. Or they get to the corner of the end of the block, don't know where to go. That's why teenagers end up on the streets. And that's why 4 days after running away, Jennifer Wilbanks called and said she'd been kidnapped, because after she ran away, she didn't know where she was going. She didn't know where she was going. A lot of people who run away don't know where they're going, metaphorically. They run away to this city or that city to get away from this, but they don't know where they're going. In fact, most people spend more time planning their vacation than planning their life. They plan out their vacation, where they're going on vacation, but they don't take time to really plan out where their life is going. So, like the prodigal son who didn't think his wisdom of his father was important, we sometimes think that perhaps the wisdom of God is not important. So we find ourselves now in this most unusual time in history. A very unusual time. Our nation is under siege. Aliens fled into our homeland, and our leaders looked the other way. Not only do they look the other way, but they even help the aliens to come in. They swarm about us. Large corporations are often directly responsible for bringing millions of aliens into our home. They bring them in from Asia, they bring them in from the Middle East, they bring them in from Africa, South America, and other places. And not just America, but all the white nations of Europe are facing the same thing. We don't see it here too much. I mean, we see a little bit of it. We're kind of in a little bubble here in Boone County, and there's other bubbles around the country too. We don't really often see it, but there's a massive invasion to our homeland. A massive invasion. And somehow, so often, we get into this little bubble, we think we're going to escape it. We think these little bubbles are going to float down the sewer forever, and nothing ever going to bust the bubble. So we don't want to listen so often to God and His warnings to love our people. We just kind of ignore it. We wrap ourselves to our own private lives, which is important, take care of families and our jobs and so forth, but we somehow shelter ourselves from the real need of our people throughout the country. We are facing the attempted genocide of white people. Our monuments are being torn down. We are being told our heroes were really demons. George Washington was really a demon. Thomas Jefferson was really a demon. Columbus was really a demon. Eldridge Cleaver talked about that in his book called Soul and Ice back in the late 60s. I received one as a gift from a communist bookstore. They generously gave it to me. I guess they didn't realize they gave it to me. I just happened to find out I had it when I walked the door in my pocket. But anyway, Soul and Ice. And he talked about the heroes, our heroes. He said the worst thing that happened to the white race is they found out that the heroes were demons. And it's true. They tell us your ancestors are racist. They want you to discount that. They want you to run away from your history, run away from your heritage, run away from your forefathers. They want you to run away from all that because there's a whole new world out here that's going to be wonderful. A whole new world, diversity, love. And you need to run away, escape all the racism of your forefathers. Because they're horribly racist, we're told. And they demand that you spit on their graves, and they demand that you spit on the memory of your forefathers. You know this is true. And that's why you're here, I understand, today. Not just to come to church. I know we have this idea we come to church to worship God. We hear that all the time from church. You know, maybe that's true. I'm not saying it's not true. But in light of what's going on in the world today, we're not here. I don't see us coming here because we want to worship God. We worship God out there in the forest. We're here because we want to build a community. Our people are under siege. Our people are under attack. And we want to build a community of people who can remain strong. And we want our children to inherit that courage. So we don't come to church because we want to worship God. You can go into the woods and go fish and do that. You come here because you understand the importance of building this racial community and embellishing your children in this important cause. And if you don't embrace it, your child will not. It's just that simple. Somebody said one time, the only thing we have to do to ensure our victory is don't lose our children. And yet I see people all the time who've lost their children. It's sad. This message of white Christian revival is important, but yet we often do not make it a priority in our lives. We want to run away from our responsibility. It's kind of like the story, if I can tell this correctly, about a salesman traveling through the hills of Newton County, and he stopped to visit an old farmer inside of up on the cabin, and there's a hound dog sitting on the porch of this old wooden cabin. And every now and then the hound dog goes, you know, a few minutes later the dog whines again. After about 4 or 5 times, the dog, the guy said, "What's wrong with your dog?" And he said, "Well, he's laying on a nail." "Well, why don't he move?" Well, he said, "It doesn't bother him enough yet." And there's a lot of people here, we complain, we talk about what's going on. We're laying on this nail, and we complain about it, but we just don't realize the need to do something about it. The importance of doing something. We whine about this nail that we're laying on, and yet we don't see the need to do something about it. So we run away from our responsibility. We're afraid of coming under some type of discipline. We know we live in dangerous times, and we know our leaders have betrayed us. We know that. I mean, you don't have to be necessarily in the white nationalist movement. You just know we've been betrayed. Conservative, the liberals, of course, they're all happy. But I'm talking about if they have a conservative bent, they might not necessarily understand a racial angle to it, but they know that we live in dangerous times. They know our leaders have betrayed us. And there are millions of people in this massive deception. Our children are a minority in our own country. And our nation sinned. So often Christians will say to God, I give you my life, I just don't give it to you completely. We hear that. I give you my life. It's kind of like the man who's getting married to his wife and said, honey, I promise to be faithful to you 99% of the times. That's not good enough, is it? I promise to be faithful 99% of the time. So we, without realizing it, we don't constantly aware of it, but our nature, it's our sinful nature, calls us to run away from God, just like that young man ran away from his responsibilities, prodigal son. And then we're told in the Bible not to, and when we run away, we become entangled in the affairs of the world. The Bible tells us we become entangled in the affairs of the world. He warns us not to do that, because the affairs of the world, they take over our life. And so we have to be careful. I mean, the affairs of the world are still the affairs of the world. Christ said, you're in the world, but you don't have to be a part of the world. So we are involved in things of the world. We understand that. But it takes some real wisdom to understand you can't let those things control you. In 2 Timothy 2:4, I think I have it on the screen. No man warreth entangleth himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who has chosen him to be a soldier. The Apostle Paul likened the Christian to be a soldier. And a soldier, in the mind, in a way we understand it compared to the way a normal church may understand it or teach it, we understand that you're literally a soldier. Apostle Paul says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and wickedness in high places, spiritual wickedness in high places. There's some mighty, mighty powerful influences that dominate our government and coming out of New York and over television and international corporations who are attempting to suck the spirit away from ourselves, but more so to suck the spirit away from our children, to totally disconnect us and our children from our heritage, from our inheritance. So we look at politicians and we look at the nation and we get angry with them because they do nothing. We get angry at the politicians. They're not doing anything. Yet how many of us are guilty of doing nothing also? How many of us are guilty of doing nothing? Our nation has turned against God, has run away from serving him. It is so obvious. It's so obvious. Our people, our nation, does not accept this responsibility. Just like that young man ran away from his responsibility to have the joy of the world. We have this national responsibility. We have personal responsibility. That we understand that we are part of this network to reach people for this wonderful message of racial survival, white Christian revival. Remember, God, your race, the race we belong to, are the children of that wonderful covenant God made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The sons of Israel, you're the children of Israel. You're that covenant that God made. And I know sometimes people have told me over the years, I'm sure they've told you, oh, you could say, Tom, you could have been born black. Anybody have that told you? You could have been born black. No, you couldn't have. You could not have been born black. You could not have been born black. I could not have been born black any more than I could have been born a centipede or a chicken or a cow or a rabbit or a duck. I mean, and the reason why you could not have been because, as the Bible teaches us, the sons of Israel are the sons and daughters of God. There's a vast difference between, the way I see it anyway, and somebody may not see it this way, there's a vast difference between the idea that, well, you were just born white, this person was born black, or this person was born white, this person was born a duck, or chicken. No, the Bible is clear that all creation, he's the creator of all things. The Bible says that very clearly. He's the creator of all things. But it also said he is only the father to Israel, the covenant people, our people. He's only father to Israel. And over 200 times he says in the Bible that he's the mighty God of Israel. Not once he says, I'm the mighty God of the Negro, the mighty God of the Japanese, the mighty God of the Bangladeshis, or the mighty God of the Bushmen, Australia, or whatever. Over 200 times he says, I'm the mighty God of Israel, over your people. And that doesn't include the times when he says he's the king of Israel and savior of Israel, salvation of Israel, high tower for Israel, their wall, their protection, their salvation. Anyway, so we have that responsibility to our people. And people may say, well, I'm not a preacher. Perhaps so, but we also have a responsibility. Part of a network to reach people. The way you live speaks louder than what you say. You may not be a preacher, but the Apostle Paul speaks about how we are all members of one body, and we all need to work together in order to make the body to perform properly. Now, maybe none of us are living like pigs. A lot of people listen to this on the internet, so I'm not just talking to people here, but also those who will be listening on the internet. And you may not be living with pigs, but a lot of people, even our own racialist movement, understand perhaps, or maybe need to understand, that you're not really living the way you should. If you really want to reach our people, if you want to reach them with this message of hope and deliverance, then it's important that your message is clear and they can see it clearly. So it's important how we live and how we act and how we talk to people. It's important that we convey a message that we love our people and our heritage and culture. That's where our power lies. Our power lies in the fact that we love our people. When these politicians, the difference between us and these guys in Washington, D.C., is we really do love our people. We really do love our people. And that's why we're willing to take all the name calling and abuse and so forth, because inside we really do love our people. So we need to be committed to this life of bringing this message of white Christian revival to our nation. We are told we should be doing, Nike says, do your own thing. We hear that all the time, do your own thing. Young kids say, I'm going to do my own thing. Well, actually, Solomon tells young people, he actually said, go out and have life, enjoy life. Do all the things you want to do. He kind of tells them that, but then he said, wait a minute though, just remember, when you get to the end of your days, you're going to have to answer for everything you've done. You're going to have to answer. You want to go on all life? All right. But there's going to come a time when you have to answer for those things. So we talk about our nation has turned away from God. But we see, or fail to see, that we have done the same thing so often. We have failed to really commit ourselves to this message of reaching our people. And we need to understand that we've been disconnected from this mission. We've been disconnected from our heritage, from our culture, our families. Malachi talks about it, about how in the last days that he's going to send forth Elijah the prophet. It was a metaphor of the ministry, of a ministry to reach his people. And he says, from the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to the fathers. We have been disconnected from our ancestry. So we understand that this prodigal son ran away from his father, ran away from his responsibilities, thought the only thing that mattered in life was his good times, and he thought he could hide from God, hide from the responsibility, the same way as a child sometimes will hide their face underneath a pillow or put their arms, because they think that you can't see them suddenly because they're hiding. They can't see you, so you can't see them. David says, "Whither shall I go? Where shall I go from thy spirit? Where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend up into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall your hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me." There's no running away from God. There's no place to go. There's no place to go. God has not abandoned us. When a child runs away in a busy, congested store, we all know. I find it strange. I find it strange, and yet I suppose I did this. I'm sure I did the same thing. Every child does it. The child runs away from the one who loves and cares and protects them the most. I mean, they're with mom and dad. They love that child the most. And what would the child do? Run off into a strange crowd. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And yet they do it. And yet we laugh about that, but then we do the same thing, don't we? But here's the good news. The prodigal son, when he came to himself, he said, "How many hired servants of my father hath bread enough to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no more worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired servants." And he arose and came to his father, but he was yet a far way off. His father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. That's the answer for us. Whether a person is totally living a life in sin and disregard to even a concept of righteousness, whether a person totally has defiled themselves, or whether it's a good person who just doesn't understand the responsibility they have. Like I said, I suspect this prodigal son probably was a good person. We don't read that he went out and started committing crimes. He went to work. He worked hard. He worked very hard, helping the man take care of the people. So he probably was a good person. But he ran away from his responsibility. And we have a responsibility, a God-given responsibility to love our people, love our heritage, love our culture, and take a message of white Christian revival to our people. Everybody can't do it the same way. Everybody isn't called to do the same thing. Everybody has different responsibility. But we're always called to do that. We were not called to be our profession, whatever our profession may be. Sometimes people identify themselves, well, I'm a plumber, or I'm an electrician, or I'm a carpenter, or I'm a lawyer, or a barber, like Jonathan, or whatever the case may be. And so that's what we do, but that's not our identity. Our identity should always be one thing. Our identity, our purpose is to bring a message, a white Christian revival, to love our people, love our heritage, love our culture, and be concerned about their future and the future of our children. That's our cause. That's our mission. That's the mission for everyone. Our mission isn't to cut hair. Our mission is to be a plumber. Our mission is to be whatever profession you have. That isn't your mission. That's just what you do to provide a living. But the mission of every single man and woman in the church, the mission of every single person is to take on that responsibility in some capacity to love our people and take this wonderful message of white Christian revival to them. No matter how far we run from God, He is always there. No matter how often we fail, He is always there to lift us up. No matter how we might think we are hiding from God and think we can hide from our responsibility, you can't. He's always here. He's always near us. He's always waiting and willing to receive us, just like that Father received His Son. He's always willing to receive us. Only thing we have to do is focus on what our responsibility is to our people, to our nation, to our homeland, to our children. We need to focus on that and fulfill that mission and return back to that cause that is so ransomed church of God. And this is the people that we are reaching to. So anyway, let's close with a word of prayer. Our Father, we thank you for your wonderful blessings upon us. We pray that you give us strength and courage to understand that we are in a battle. We are indeed soldiers of the cross, follower of the Lamb. Help us to understand that there's a great mission before us. They hate our children. They hate our children. They hate those children yet unborn. Father, help us to love those children, love those little babies that are yet unborn, and help us restore righteousness in our nation. Help us to understand our responsibility. Help us no longer run away from you, but return back to the fold, return back to the mission, return back to the family business. We ask in your name, amen.
Excellent message, Pastor Rob. If you'd like to get more information regarding church service as well as our publication, The Torch, you can write to us at Christian Revival Center, P.O. Box 602, Harrison, Arkansas 72601. That's Christian Revival Center, P.O. Box 602, Harrison, Arkansas 72601. Or you can email us at revival@southshore.com. Revival@southshore.com. And with that, I can have John to come back up. And if everyone can please stand, and we're going to have one more song.
All right, the closing hymn today is found at page number 3. Page number 3, All People That on Earth Do Dwell. And we'll sing all 4 verses, and then the 5th verse in italics we'll also sing. Hymn number 3.
Amen.